not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual purge sanctioned by the U.S. government. Weapons of Class 4 and lower have been authorized for use during the purge. All other weapons are restricted. Government officials of ranking 10 have been granted immunity from the purge and shall not be harmed. Commencing at the siren, any and all crime, including murder, will be legal for 12 continuous hours. Police, fire, and emergency medical services will be unavailable until tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. when the purge concludes. Blessed be our new founding fathers and America, a nation reborn. May God be with you all.
Energy on the truck, boy.
Okay, gentlemen. So let's get started with the festivities here. Now, these recent events, this conflict between MRAs and MGTOW that's going on is an evolving situation. And so instead of doing one long giant video, I'm going to do shorter ones depending on the issues I want to address. Now, I want to say, first and foremost, that my loyalty lies with MGTOW, and I wish to defend MGTOW from those currently attacking it, so go ahead and color me biased, right? I don't care. Now, I've worked damn hard to make a contribution to the MGTOW community I'm proud of, and therefore I'm here to dispel and defend against the lies and attacks being leveled at MGTOW, and I intend to do so successfully. Now, I need to say one thing before I continue here that's going to be a central theme to the arguments put forth here, and that's simply that MGTOW know how to stay in their lane. We know how to stay in our lane. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I mean that we know that MGTOW know how to stay out of MRA affairs. We know how to do our own thing in our own communities, and I propose that MRAs do not. I propose today that MRAs, not all of course, but some, don't know how to just leave MGTOW well enough alone to do their own thing, and worse yet, these MRAs that are doing this project their inability to not meddle in our affairs onto us. Now, let me explain to you what I believe led up to this point we're at now. In the immediate sense, this started with an MRA, or, that's not the right term, I mean an anti-feminist agitator, or oops, that's not the right one, that sounds offensive. I mean a non-feminist agitator, or no, that's not it. I mean a denizen of the non-femplex sector. I mean, whatever. An MRA, that's what he is, right? This all started with an MRA named Fida Bogan. In the larger sense, though, it started with an attitude that MRAs had towards a once fledgling MGTOW community that has exploded in growth to the point of rivaling them that never went away, unfortunately. But we'll get to that in a bit. Just for now, know that this attitude that has persisted among many MRAs is the inspiration for the current attempts to label MGTOW as dogmatic for attempting to build, as the MRAs have done for quite some time now, an identity for themselves unique to them. And it's quite predictable, really. MGTOW, according to these folks, for the crime of merely asking the question of whether or not MGTOW can in fact be married, are anything from fascists to a new variant of social justice warriors to collectivists, and all this generic conspiratard shit that, oddly enough, displays a uniformity in how these accusations are hurled at anyone and everyone that is in a part of their othering brigade that can only be described as severely collectivist, severely dogmatic, and damn near cult-like. Now, to give you an idea of the projection that these morons are capable of, we return to Fidobo, who sparked this off by, after several passive-aggressive jabs at MGTOW, particularly myself and Stardust, urging us in a fake, slimy fashion to stop talking about things like hypergamy so as to not offend women, came out, about a month ago, this time openly attacking MGTOW, calling us omega males and circus clowns, all the while claiming like a fake little bitch that he was doing it as a friend. How nice, right? And then he tried to saddle the YouTube MGTOW community with a fucking manifesto, taking care also to cite that this manifesto necessarily defines a MGTOW as a libertarian, and explicitly does not mention that marriage is off limits to MGTOW. Let that sink in, gentlemen. MGTOW are fascists for asking the question of whether or not MGTOW can be married, when a month earlier, Fida Bogan over here tries to railroad us into a fucking manifesto saying that we can't be part of a marriage strike and telling us what our politics should be according to some decade-old, internet age, mind you, rulebook two so-called MGTOW wrote before MGTOW even experienced the surge in popularity it has come to enjoy years later. Ironic, isn't it? Notice that when Fiedelbogen did this, there were no MRAs calling him dogmatic. There were no accusations of fascism. Nobody called him a social justice warrior. Nobody said, careful, Fiedelbogen. If you pull yourself away from groveling at the Women Against Feminism shrine long enough, you'll see that you're alienating MGTOW, not a fucking proverbial peep. Now, given that fact alone, there's nothing even wrong with this. MGTOW defended themselves properly. I called it out. Razor Blade Candy called it out. Many other MGTOW called it out. You see, one of the things that makes MGTOW so resilient is that unlike women, the men's movement doesn't roll out a red carpet for us. We earn respect. We don't just plop our boobs on a desk, shield wife, and watch the collective manosphere, excluding, MGTOW, swarm her subscriber button like rabid locusts. But here was Fiedelbogen, right, trying to push his manifesto on us. We told him to fuck off, he apparently did, and while that was still fresh, the whole John the Other Voice for Men thing happened, and the whole question came right back up again. And now, as far as that goes, I don't know what's going on between John and Paul or Judgy Bish and feminism with LOL. I don't even care. What's important now is that it brung this issue to the forefront, and now here we are. Here we are, gentlemen. Now the question I ask you is, who is the fascist? Who is the control freak? Who is the one being exclusionary? Who is the collectivist? Well, from where I'm standing, the answer seems simple. This term, collectivist, right? It's used by these little parakeets as a pejorative term. It's used as an insult. But it's very loosely defined, so I'll define first what it is not. Keep in mind, gentlemen, that the human race is a collectivist species. The human being is a social animal. We all belong to groups, we all practice tribalism to the inclusion and exclusion of certain groups of people, and MGTOWs are no different, and neither are MRAs. In fact, MRAs, and we'll get into this in a bit, have a long and documentable history of exclusion of certain groups they find unsavory. And here's a funny thing, there's nothing wrong with that. I support that, so long as it doesn't get, out of hand. This is a favor that MRAs do not return to MGTOW in kind, and again, we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But we all practice tribalism. MGTOW is no different, and MGTOW is correct and justified in practicing reasonable tribalism. And of course, then you're going to ask, well, what is reasonable tribalism? Who defines reasonable? And I respond that reasonable tribalism is defined by what the tribe is excluding. If who or what a tribe excludes can reasonably be shown to be antithetical or even harmful to a tribe or group, then that group is behaving reasonably in excluding it. Simple as that. That's healthy collectivism, having nothing to do with the pejorative that these morons I'm currently eviscerating are throwing around, and I intend to prove that right here and now by asking the question, is marriage antithetical or even harmful to the MGTOW community? The answer is a resounding yes, and excluding it from our community is no more an act of fascism than the current laws on the book in the most free and open nations of the planet stating one cannot consent to be voluntarily enslaved constitute an act of fascism either. If I enter into a contract with someone stating that I, Barbarossa, am voluntarily and willingly giving my freedom to you for some agreed upon compensation, and I say to my now slave master that I now and forever consent to do your bidding, whatever it may be. Let's say I do that. What happens? Well, our society has made this illegal, and with good reason. It is impossible to have informed consent in this situation. If my slave master tells me, I command you to have yourself sterilized and I don't want to do it, he cannot say, well, but you consented. It's impossible for me to give informed consent. The only real circumstance where this type of arrangement is possible is in the military, and it turns out that the one exception I can think of perfectly illustrates why marriage is an immoral institution that is not only criminal and fraudulent, but impossible to consent to without forcing the man into a de facto state of enslavement. This is why I say MGTOW have a right to ask these tough questions of whether or not married men can be MGTOW, because they are indeed extremely relevant questions that need answering. Now, if we return to the military example, let's say that tomorrow I sign myself up to the United States military. I talk to a recruiter, and the meeting ends with me signing my name on that dotted line. Let's say then that I go home and my friends tell me, well, what the hell were you thinking? Now the army owns you. You just signed away your freedom. Now I can tell them, fuck you, man. I'm free. What are you saying, that just because I signed up for the army that they have my signature, that I'm not free to do whatever I want? Fuck you. I'm free as can be. I don't have to do anything anyone tells me. And let's say that the next day, the army recruiter calls and he says, well, you have a brief stint in boot camp starting tomorrow, and then we're shipping you off to the worst parts of Syria and Pakistan. You have a date with ISIS militants. And you better kill them, Private, because trust me, they're going to try their damnedest to kill you. And so be ready to go at 0800 hours. So let's say that I then say, but wait, Sergeant, I only consented to joining the army. I never consented to killing people. And let's say that he says, well, too bad, son, I've got your signature right here. You consent to whatever I tell you to do. And then let's say I panic and I go AWOL. Do you know what happens? Oh, I don't know. Maybe they'll throw me in jail or court-martial me. Because the truth is, I never had my freedom or informed consent the moment I signed that dotted line. The military can now order you to kill other human beings, or worse yet, put yourself in a situation where you can die. How many soldiers do you think consent to dying on the battlefield? How many drafted soldiers consented to dying on the battlefield? Is it even possible? Now juxtapose onto this scenario a man fully versed in red pill and MGTOW philosophy, fully knowledgeable in what things like gynocentrism and misandry are all about, who claims to have informed consent and goes ahead and gets married. Does he really have informed consent? He doesn't. He doesn't because he doesn't know in advance what he's consenting to. He is the AWOL soldier telling himself he has freedom to refuse deployment. Now, many of you are familiar with the concept of the moving legal goalpost of marriage. Let's take a man that got married, say, 50 years ago. He's been, whether he realizes it or not, legally compelled, without any contact or warning, to consent to a consistent renegotiation of this contract. Since, of course, 50 years ago, the marriage contract had completely different terms than it does today. Meaning that there's still people alive today who were married before the existence of no-fault divorce and lifetime alimony, who will now have to pay that alimony if his wife divorces him. And MRAs are going to tell us that we as MGTOW can't decide to reject such a fraudulent scam and keep it away from our community? And we're the fascists? We're the fascists because we don't want to wait the, 5 decades or so it's going to take the MRAs to rectify marriage, and even then, only potentially temporarily? Fuck off! You're the fascists. You're the control freaks. You're the ones projecting your collectivism onto us. Let me give you some instruction on what constitutes an act of fascism for all of these retards claiming MGTOW are just like the feminists or some other variant of this mindless dribble. The difference between MGTOWs and feminists isn't in how we view the opposite sex. That's a matter of opinion, and we're entitled to it. It's in how we react to you not sharing our opinions on the opposite sex or on marriage, for example. Here's where you affix the pejorative form of the word collectivist properly. Let's say you disagree with MGTOW that say you can't be a MGTOW in marriage. What happens? You go home, you log off of your computer, you keep living your life as you wish, nobody forces you to agree, you're welcome to disagree, and nobody lays a finger on you. Tell feminists, for example, that you don't agree with some of their ideas, and they're liable and capable of using state violence and coercion to force you to agree. You may lose your job, you may go to jail, you may be accused of some gynocentrism-friendly crime, like a false rape accusation, and end up in jail where you'll be raped yourself, possibly. And here's the kicker. Traditionalism does the same thing.